Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Can you guys hear Can you guys hear me? And maybe I can see my screen. Good evening, guys. Can you guys see my screen? Um. Um. Hello. Can you see my screen? You guys said you can't see my screen, no. Um. Um. I've tried to reach out to the technical guys so they can sort it out because I've already shared my screen. Let's wait for some minutes. Um, so we are going to continue our class on where we stopped the last time. The we focus we our last 2 or 3 classes is focused on um databases. Our last 2 or 3 classes focus on databases where we practice MySQL database, in-depth practice on MySQL database, which I believe that every one of us will have tried to learn more about it. And what we are going to be doing today is working on Node.Js API. We're going to build an API with Node.js Express, and we are going to work with MySQL database and Node MongoDB database. So we're just going to build a simple API to get data, delete data, update data, which is going to abstract the database queries to perform the operation. All right. So what is Express.js? I mean, we we remember that when we are talking about the Express.js in our previous class, where I explained that Express.js is a flexible Node.js framework. We have a lot of framework, alternative framework we can use with Node.js. We have Next.js, Adonis.js, and a whole lot of frameworks. But our preferred one is going to be Express.js because of its functionalities and its features. It is very light to use. It's very simple to use, and it's flexible, and it's very okay and very robust to build a large scale web application. So the tools that comes with Express.js is these are the tools: routing tools, middleware tools, and other features. So I will explain to us what middleware what is middleware and what is routers in the Express. So basically, what router means is that it's just a set of instructions on how the API will perform. So an API comes with API methods. You list API in a specific file, and you instruct it to be the endpoint where whenever you want to access a specific data, you call the route. You define a route to perform a specific operation. It's like the door to anything on the web application. For example, you define a route to perform a login operation slash login. That's a route. You now connect the route or define the operation you want to perform when the request hits the slash login. So that's the functionalities of the route. And the middleware is a set of instructions that works within between the request and the response. So we're going to talk more about that in the future. And one more thing is that I noticed that this is the last week of our mentorship program, which we only have two more classes after today. And I really want us to take this week very serious, to extend work extensively on all the things we can learn, and ask more questions and any problem we are facing. All right. Uh, so you guys said I should increase my screen size. Can you guys see it now? All right. So now I'm not going to talk about how to set up the Express server. So it's very easy to set up. I'm coming. Let me share. All right. Can you guys see my screen very well now? Um, can you guys see the screen? All right. The screen is live. So how to set up Express? To set up Express is very easy. What you need to do is just create your folder, create your folder, your project folder, and set up the package.json. And to set up a package.json, all we need to do is create. Let me show us how to initialize a Node.js project. Um, I will share my screen now and walk us through how to do that, because what we have here on the screen, we can only read it, but I want us to practice it. Please give me a minute. All right. So I'm trying to create a folder. So I will create a folder now. I will name it backend API. Backend API. That's the name of the folder. So I will open the folder now. Backend. I'm trying to navigate to the folder so I can open it. All right. So I'm now inside the folder, which is an empty folder. So now the goal is to show us how to set up a Node.Js Express project. So in the previous class, when we were talking about Node.js, you guys remember we discussed what npm and nvm is. Now we remember that I said the Node package manager npm is what we are going to be using to install and set up the Node.js and any other package you want to use to work on, whether it's on the React project or on the Node.js project. So now let's set up the project now. So what we need to do is type npm init. So let's pay attention to over here. So you can type npm init to initialize a project. So when you do that, you can follow all the set of instructions that comes with it. The name of the package you want to create. So it's going to create a package.json file for us, which will hold all the packages we want to install to run the project. So you can use this as a default, the package name, which is the backend API, as a default. You press enter, the version, the description, a backend bootcamp backend API project. Okay, somebody said it's tiny. How about now? Is it visible very well? All right. So the description, the presenter, the entry point, which is index.js, as what we want to use, the test command. We are not writing any test at the moment, and we are not specifying the GitHub repository right now. So the keywords, we are not setting any keywords. The author name, you can predefine, you can put in the name of the author on your hand or anyhow you want to do that, the license and everything. So now, when you press enter for all the set of instructions, this is what you are going to get, the packet.json. Now you can now use yes to answer everything. So now this is what we have. We have a set of instructions inside our packet.json. It will create a packet.json file for us with the default configuration of what we want. Now, let me show us one thing. It takes us like 3 or 4 steps to set up all these things. We can also do that by using just a single command to bootstrap this package.json file, what are we going to type? It's very simple. The instruction we typed the other time, which is npm init. You remember that time we pressed enter? Now all we need to do is just put -y in front of it, and it will set up the default package.json for us without asking us all the questions. Simple and direct. So now, what are we going to do now? When we instruct this package.json file, we said the entry file of this package.json file is index.js file. We need to install an index.js file, index.js. We create an index.js file. Now, we need to install the Express framework itself, the Express library, to be able to run the Express projects, Node.js Express. So all we need to do is just type npm install, like we did in the front end when we are working on React. Npm install all the libraries we need, all the package we need. So npm install Express. So this will pull the Express framework from the Node package manager where it's hosted for us locally, to pull it into our local projects, so we can have a copy of it to be able to work on the project. So now you press enter. So it has been successfully installed. So now Express has been set up for us with all the necessary packages we need to run the application, the default Node.js application. Everything is now here. Now what we need to do, and this is the Express folder. This is the Express folder, and everything we need to understand to work on our project is here. Can we all see that? The request, the response, everything that we need, the middleware and the router, as we described the other time. So what we need to do is that everything we want to do now, all the dependency we need on Express, it will always come from this folder. Okay, so now let's first go back to the slide and follow the instructions. So when we want to create the Express application, these are the key things we need to focus on. We need to initialize the Express application, initialize the API, and start the server. So this set of instructions, it will only take us like 4 to 10 lines of application to do this, just to provide and provision our first line of API. So what are we going to do now? We need to start the application const express equals to require express. So after that, we initialize the application. We initialize the application to the instance of Express. So this Express is coming directly from the library when you install. All the supported Node.js features is inside the Express. So now we can now start the application. So we can set, just put the instruction app.listen. We set the port, the predefined port we want it to run on. We put it as 3000. Then the callback is a function, a set of instructions we want to run when the application starts. So we can log console.log. The server is running. Where the server is running on which ports? On port 3000. We can define these ports here. Const ports equals this port 3000. We put the port here, then we define it here, so we can be able to reuse it. So the code here just shows that we want to spin up a server, a simple server. So now all we need to do is just come back to the package.json and set up the script that will start the application for us. So we need to do start. So what do we need to run on? Node index.js, which is the entry file. So now in our command line, all we need to do is just input npm start to start the application. The moment you run npm start, you can press enter. Can we all see that? Can we all see that? The server is running on port 3000. We've already spin up a server running on port 3000. So now, we now need to configure the route we want to listen, the route we want to serve on the application. So the next thing we are going to do is define a get method API that listen on the default route request response. So I will explain to us what this is all about now. So we can now res.send. What do we need to display? Hello world. This here is a simple API with just 13 line of code. We spin up our simple API, get API. So now we need to stop the execution from that is currently running because it needed to recompile. It needs to recompile to have this route we commission right now. So what we need to do is restart the server by typing npm start one more time. So then we type npm start, we start the application, the server is running on port 3000. So basically what this means is that if we go to our navigate back to our browser and hit the ports 3000 on our web browser, so what we need to do is just come back here. Can you guys see my screen? So this is what we need to do. Let me show us. So what that means is that on our web browser, this is what we need to input on the web browser. HTTP localhost 3000, the port we are running on. So this URL, if you paste this URL on your web browser, you should be able to get hello world that will send back from the server. This hello world, comma, welcome to backend projects. So now this is what we want to send back to the browser the moment we hit this request. Now what we need to do is stop the server and rerun the server one more time. Npm start. This is what we get. Can we all see that? We can also define another route, app.get / user. If we define app.get.user, you can define parameters for us to show something to the user. Let me do that one more time. Let me show us how we can get that now. Request us the rest. So this is the request object. This serves as the request object, and this serves as the response object in the application. So you can send res.json back to the user. So I wanted to show us something. User info. So we can get the user info from username. So this username, we are going to extract it from here. Request dot params dot username. So what this simply means that if you navigate in the web browser, you input this route slash user and your username. Any username you type, any name you type, any parameter you input after you input the user is going to display here. So let us show us how that works. If you stop the web browser, the web server, and start the server again, npm start. The moment you start this, you can go back to the web browser, input this. Let me show us again so we can understand what I'm saying. So localhost, this is the landing route, but now we've defined another route called slash user followed by any name you want to use to represent the username. So my name is Sodiq. I can represent my username as Sodiq. So now if I type this on the web browser, I'm expecting that to return, to extract the, can we all see that? I'm expecting the browser to extract this parameter from the request and display it to me. So this is one of the, can we all see that working with Node.Js with Express, it makes it very easy for us to build a simple web browser, web application. Now, let's go back to the slide and give us more explanation on it. So now, this is how to set up a simple web server, which we already covered. Now, we can now picture in our mind, okay, if this is how we set up a web browser, how do we connect this to our database? How can we write an API to perform a real life application like sign up a user login and all sort of things? So with this server, we can all do that ourselves. All right. Now, routing in the Express.js. We just explained to us how the routing works. We define a default routing, like a landing routing, and also a predefined routing that accepts and extracts the name and username from the request. Now, we understand that I said the other time that this serves as the request object and the response object, which comes with the library. So now, any functionalities that we want to perform on the request, you can extract that from the request, such as the request parameter and the request queries. So I would show us on how to do that in the next thing, in the following slide. All right. So now, all the API we show us right now, the other time, those API perform a get operation. Now, how do we define and work with post data? In the sense that when you want to log in on an application or any web application, you input your information. Our last project on the front end, which is React, we show us how all those API works, post request, delete, which we practice. You send data through them. Now you are on the receiving end. You are the one designing the API now. You are not just working with the API, you are writing the API to perform the operation of receiving the data. So how do you do that? How do you write the API to perform an operation of receiving data from the user and updating data in the database? The same thing goes for accepting data from the delete request and delete data in the server. So these are the things we are going to be performing with us in this class. All right. So middleware. I explained to us in the other time that middleware is just an intermediary. So middleware functions are executed in the request response cycle. Like I explained the other time, is an intermediary between the request and the response. They can modify the request or response, terminate the request response cycle, or pass control to the next middleware function. This is just an English explanation of it. Let me give us a real world explanation of how it works. A real world explanation of how middleware works. When we define an API, set of instruction API, you define an API for user to be able to log in. When the user log in, you need to log in before you can access some data on the web application. Now, all those API that comes after your login is called a protected API. Now, every time you want to access all those things, you no longer need to perform your login operation every time. What will be what the backend and the backend engineer is expected to design is to design a middleware that intercepts the request every time you try to access all those protected records by getting the data from the request, validating those data. If the data match the currently logged in user, authorize them, let them be able to access all the protected API. Else, terminate that operation. That's what we mean by that, by terminating the request response cycle. All right, we're going to perform all this middleware now. All right, so these are the basic functionalities of how and the types of middlewares we have in the Express. We have application level middleware, the router level middleware. The router level middleware, the application level middleware is what I explained. An interceptor that check the data, protecting an API, validating the user and authorizing the user. The router level middleware is where you define your middleware inside your router. Something like validating a data. The moment it's called, it pass through the request. You can perform your validation logic inside your middleware. That's where we have the router level middleware. Now, the built-in middleware is where you perform when you instantiate the application. The moment you instantiate the application, you want to instruct your hub to use some set of stuffs, something like express.static, that instructs the Express.js to have access to all the static files in the application. Express.json that allow the Express application to pass all the data that is being sent from the front end through the API, to pass it and understand it as a JSON file, as a JSON data. There are so on and so forth. The moment we start working with Express, we are going to understand more about it. Now, something like this, you define an app to use a request and log all the data in it. Let me show us how to do this. You inject this middleware inside your app after you instantiate it and instruct it to always log all the requests. You can define this as you can design this system using this method to design your app logger, API logger. So let me show us how this work. All right. So every time an API request hits the server, we always want to log data down. So you define an application layer middleware. So you can define it somewhere here, a middleware to do this. So you app.use, anywhere you see app.use in your application is a middleware. You can also define, let me explain what we mean over here. You can also define a middleware for error handling middleware. I will show us how to do that after this. So okay. So okay. So this is what we do. Now we are going to work with a new object now called next. Next is being used to pass execution to the next layer. Now, what this next will do is that after the execution of this block of code, perform the next execution after this. So now we are going to show us that what are we expecting to do? Console.log request logger. So date logger. So now what do we want to do here? We want to log date dot now. Okay, so now can we all see that now? I want us to pay attention to what we want to do here. What do we do here we do now? So I'm going to stop the application and start it again. So the moment you start the application again, I cannot go to the browser. So when I go to the browser, I hit this request now. It will keep on loading. But the app will log the request date logger. It will log the data. This date is in Unix. That's why it's in like this. It's in Unix. Now, this date, the application is stuck inside this block of code. That's why the app is loading. Can we all see the browser is how the browser is loading? If I stop the app and go back to the landing page, it should still be the same thing. The app will keep loading because it is stuck inside this layer block, inside this execution. Now, to instruct the application that when you finish executing over here, continue to the next level of execution. That's where the next express function comes in. You cannot do next. That after successfully you execute all this block of code, pass the execution to the next line of block line of code in the execution, because app.use is a middleware. You are expecting it to perform an operation. whether you want it to stop the execution or you want to continue the execution. That's what the middleware is all about. Now, if I stop this application and run the app again, start the server again, come back to the web browser, I start this. Can we all see? The app respond back to us, and at the same time, it will log for us. Can we all see that? Okay. All right. So can we see that? So I change the date from Unix to the date we can understand. Can we all see the API logger? Now we can even implement functionalities to log all the API based on how we're expecting it, what is being sent to the server. Can we all see or now understand the functions and what middleware is all about? Also, we can also use middleware to handle a not found API, whereby you input an API that is not part of the system. You can all do that using this app.use. All right. So the same thing we did over here. So if our API comes down here, that means it already passed through all the execution of the code here. Okay. All right. So if you input, can we all see that? Okay. All right. So let's proceed to the next. All right. So this is more explanation on the middleware. And this is what I explained the other time. The express.json to pass data into the express using a JSON object. You are expecting the JSON likes data from the JSON from the API request. The same thing, another middleware we also have is express.url encoded to break down the URL we are sending from the request. Also, this is how we are going to be using the JSON, the express.json to pass the JSON data we are sending using the post data. So I will try and implement this for us so we can now understand how this works. So we are going to design a post API request, for the user. So what we are going to do now is app.post. So we're expecting /user, that will be the route, then request.response. So any API that comes with post, we're expecting data from the request body. So now we can extract the data, const data equals request.body. So we are sending data to the body of the API. Now, what are we going to do now? So I want us to see what will happen here. I want us to pay attention to this. So if I console.log the data that we're expecting from the request body, we're expecting this data to come as a JSON file, right? Okay, so let me show us one thing now. For the purpose of people that don't have Postman to test the API, because you can test your API using Postman, and if you are using a text editor like Visual Studio Code, you can install a package called REST client to also test your API, which is what I'm going to be using here now. So all I need to do is just define. So I'm going to define test API.http. Then all I need to do is just call the API from here. So if I instruct this API, get API. So I can also define the get post / user. This is the first one. The other one, we can also do this. So I'm trying to break it down for us. / user / Sadiq. So to so this is the format / user / username. So that's the format over there. So when you execute this, so this is what you get. Instead of using the web browser, you can always write your code and also test it on your code level. So to test this first API, we pass. All you need to do is just click on the send request, and you see the response by the side. You also, for this one, you can also do that. Test the API. You see the information by the side. Now we are working with the post data. So what do we need to do? What we need to do is define the data like this, and we can always read documentation if we don't understand anything or we want to learn more on how the REST clients work. Can we see? You can always do that to read more on everything on it. Now, so you want to send username to the backend as Mike, and the password, you want to send password as well to the backend. What we name this password. Now, if I hit this request, okay, let me return something for us. Press.send user. So if I stop this execution and run it again, so I try to hit this request, this API, I hit it this way, so I'm getting this response back. But if I check the data, can we all see this? This is what we are coming. This is where we are going. So this data is undefined. Why is it undefined? It's undefined because the middleware we are supposed to pass, this middleware, it needs to understand that the data needs to be passed as a JSON data. So now we need to instruct the app to use express.json to read the request body as a JSON object. So now this is what we are going to do. App dot use express dot JSON. So after that, you can now stop the execution of the code and restart the server again. So we can now run the projects. Now the data is coming, but is empty data. So we now need to debug why the data is empty. Request the body dot user. Is that what I'm sending? Username. The username. If I stop the server one more time and start it. Now the data is still undefined. Um, yeah, it's express.json. All right. So app dot use express.url encoded extended true. Extended is true. All right. So let me start the server and rerun it again. Um, data is still empty. Okay, let me log. Oh, um, so the REST clients instruct us to set the application, the content header, which is what I believe it should be missing now. Okay, so if I stop this and run it again, if I run it again, yeah. So this is it. So now the data is here. Data is here. I now need to instruct this to print all the data for me. So if I clear this and start the server again, enter this. So we are going to get the data back. Can we all see? Data we send from the user, the data the user sent to the server, we are logging it here. Can we all see that? All right. So we are going on a break now. So we are coming back after 10 minutes. Um, well, welcome back. Let me know if you guys can hear me and as well see my screen. Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Okay.
All right. Where this is where I'm explaining the other time. For for every one of us that want to use Postman to test the application, this is what Postman looks like to test API. To the API, we can as well display that data, that information of the user by using the user like this data instead of logging it over here. So you can close that and restart it. So now the next step, can we all see that when you run the app, this is what you get. The data user sent to the user. If I send Mike Adelowabi Adelowo, if I send it again, that's what I get. Now, when we are done with this API, we've been able to create an API, send it out to the API, and extract the data from the API. What is now the next thing, the next line of action? We need to put everything all together. We've worked with database extensively in our previous class. Now, we now need to practice and implement saving data into database and also extracting the data from the database. So now, I'm going to refresh our memory based on the last class on the SQL and everything, because those are the things we are going to be writing here. So let me walk us through the slide to explain to us what we're going to be doing. Can we see my screen? This is like the basic further structures and arrangement of how a Node.js application looks. You have your package.json, the index or app.js. So we are working with a monolithic application. That is, you have your design, your display, index.html and everything. You have it inside the view. And like I explained when we are introducing us to the Node.js in our previous class, I explained that Node.js use a templating engine, and the supported templating engine is Blade, Pog, and EJS. So now you can have a folder that holds all the routes. That is, you separate the routes away from here. So we can as well do that. But for the purpose of the class, we are not going to do that. I just want us to focus on the database, and after we can now refactor the application. So now we want to work with database. What we explain here, we can couple our system with either MongoDB or MySQL database. But for the purpose of what we've been working on, we've been working with my SQL database before. Now, I'm going to show us how to do that. So to work with MySQL database, we need to install SQL from the package.json. So let me show you something. W3 school. So you can do this. So what we need to do is install SQL in our application. So to do that, this is what we are going to do. So I need to stop the server. Take a look at our package.json. So in the dependency, we have Express. So I can npm install MySQL. So when we do this, it's going to install the SQL package that will enable us to communicate with our database. So where is the database? This is the data. Let me show us. We all remember the database we created in our last class. This is the database, the Bootcamp data, right? We all remember. So now, this is the data we have there. We're now going to write API to fetch data from this database and API to save data into the database. We all remember that in our previous class, we only write queries to save data and extract data from this database. Now, we are now going to combine the API and the query together. So how are we going to do that? The first thing is to connect to the database. Make a connection to the database. So how are we going to do that? So over here, we are going to connect DB. So by following the instruction listed here, so what we need to do is just do the connection in a proper way. So I'm going to show us now. So for us to understand this, I will break it down for us. So we can define our SQL object, a database object. We can name it database, MySQL, MySQL. So now we now need to create a database connection, connect to DB. So const database equals to MySQL dot create a connection, because that's what we want to do. We want to create a connection to the database. So what are the credentials that needs to be passed to it? The database connection, the server, which is the local host, or you can either pass the server name or the IP address. So the host is root, which is my database, my database credentials, which is root, and the database name. What's the database name? So database name is Bootcamp. I hope we still remember. So Bootcamp. So database name is Bootcamp. Now, we now want to extract the data, employee data. So let's write a simple API to do that. app.get / employees. So request, response. So we now want to fetch it. So all we need to do is define the variable const employees, because we are going to write a query for it. So we need to make this a synchronous request. So now need to await the db.query, the database name. select all from employees. So that's all. Now rest.json to return the employees. All right. So basically, what we are doing here, let me explain it to us one more time. What we are doing here is that the data we have in the database, do we still remember this data? We want to write an API to fetch this data. It goes like this: slash employees. So it's a get API that goes like this: slash employees. So the instruction is that get this data from database by using this database connection to extract employee using this query, select all from employee. When you select the data, return it to the user. So now if we start the server, we start the server, npm start, we run the application. So our test.json, we copy this again, we name this slash employees to fetch employee, and it's a get request. So if we send this data now, we hit this API, okay, it's returning an error. Response stringify. Okay, what's the data looks like? Console.log employees. I'm coming. Let's try and handle our error one after the other. All right. So it's saying to convert the JSON. All right, data is way much. Okay. So employee dots. So we are extracting the result objects. Employee dots results. Coming. Let me run this and check what is it returning. All right, the client does not support this. Okay, database connection is not working. Okay, requested by the server. I'm coming. Why is this not connecting? All right, so let me check the connection again one more time before we even try to fetch the data. Okay, can we imagine? I did not even try to connect before I even fetch the data. I just jump into selecting data. So when you make the connection pool, when you create the connection, I need to connect. So that's where the error is coming from. Okay. So after the database, this is the connection. Let me rename it DB connection. So I'm making the connection for the database. We now need to connect the database itself. So every time I want to make query, so I can always check for the database connection every time. So verify make connection. Okay, instantiate the connection. So over here is where we are going to be checking if the database connection is successful or not. So we can now do db connection dot connect every time to check if the db is connected, because the credentials we input sometimes might not be correct. So if there is any error in the database connection, you should always notify us. Return database connection fail. So we should log it. Let me log it. Let me log the data. Console.log database connection, because sometimes the input and the information you input to for the database connection might not be correct. Probably you misinput your username or you misinput the password. So else the connection is successful. So now let me try and verify the connection. All right. So now if you try and retry that connection to verify the connection, so if you start the server, database connection failed. Mm, is it the information? Um, the connection does not supported. Let me try and verify this. Mm, is it the type of the database I'm using? Probably it's because of the database. All right, I'm coming. Let me use a different version of npm. I'm coming to npm install MySQL 2. So this will enable me to connect directly to it. Let me check the connection. Okay, hold on. Um, I'm suspecting it's going to be the database, the server I'm running my database. So it's not allowing it. It's not allowing that connection. Okay. If this is not working, I'll try to use this. Okay. So we'll be creating pool every time. I'm coming now. All right. Let me try and use the other version of MySQL. Um, please give me a minute. All right. So it's resolved. The database is connected. So now the database is connected. I can now try to fetch the data. All right. This is stopping the execution. What's the error again? All right. So it's saying this. Okay, the database is not defined. So because we're no longer using the DB anymore, I'm using DB connection. So DB connection is what I'll be using instead of using the database name. And the database object we define the other time. So yes. All right. So I can even as well. Okay, yeah. So if we test this database, it's still throwing. Mm, it's saying you can try dot catch to invoke. All right. Okay. Because we're using it as a promise, it has to be the promise version of what I'm running. That 2 is not is not supported. I'm coming. MySQL dash. Okay. MySQL. Uh, let's check this. I'm coming. I did not even see this coming at all. This connection issue. Okay. I did not even need to define uh it's not define. Uh hmm, I'm coming. Let me check the documentation one more time. All right. Make the connection. This is exactly what we are doing now. Right. I'm coming. So what the issue I'm facing is the connection is throwing off. Okay, when I make the connection, oh, okay, now I understand what is going on. All right, so this is what will happen. I need to wrap this. Mm, connection.query. All right, so let me define this as a function db connection, because it needs to be db connection equals I'm coming. You guys should give me a minute. I need to figure this out. So we don't even no longer need this. So every time we try to connect to the server, hold on. Okay, let me try and run it this way. So before we do this, we connect to the database, fetch the data, okay, so let me try and run it one more time. All right, so now, okay, so I'm eating the, okay, so the data is here. You just need to extract the data out of it. So it's working now. So we now need to display it. So this is returning. So every time we try to fetch a data from database, it's coming as this. We need to disrupt it, result and feed. So if I try to print this result out, if I try to print this result out, all right, so the data is here. Okay, so finally I've been able to resolve it. So now if we try to test the API one more time, can we all see that this is data from database? This is what the API looks like. The data we are getting from database is here. Can we all see that we have data in the database, just two data from database? Can we all see that now? Can we see my screen? Do we all see what's happening here? Are you guys there? Can we see? We've been able to make a database connection and at the same time fetch data from database using this API that we define. This simple line of code /employee is returning all the data we have in the database. Can we all see? It's returning the two data: Adewale administrator, Sarah, and also administrator. Data we have in the database. The same thing we go for if you want to insert the data into the database. The same thing will happen. So let me walk us through it one more time. Let me walk us through it one more time. Let me show us one more time. Let me show us one more time what happened. So we define the express. When you install the node MySQL library to make a connection to the database. So now here we are making the connection to the database and using that connection to fetch data from the database. Can we see that? Can we see that? The normal query we normally write in our database is what we write. The database connection is what we are using. Database connection dot query. We write the query we need to it. So now we can now use the same method to insert data into the database using a post method. We are going to write the post method to insert the data, this data, into the database. Let's pay attention to this. We are going to define the same API but different API method, which will be post. And app.post / employees. The same way we defined it previously is what we are going to do. The same way. Now we're expecting name, age, and salary from the request. Do we still remember how we extract the data? So what we are going to do is const data equals the request dot body that we defined the other time. Now let's check how the body will look like. Let's pay attention to this. I want to log it again for us. Console.log the data. Let me name it request data. The request data. So if I stop the server and start it again, go back to our post data, we define it / employee. Now we're expecting to send name, Mike Adelowo, position as HR, age, the age 39, then salary is 400,000. So now if we send this data now, I'm expecting us to see the data in our log over here, the data we are sending to the request. / employee / employee posts. Oh, it's not the same thing. Employees. All right. So we retest it and send it again. Can we see that? So now this data, as we receive it here, we now need to send it to the database. So now let's pay attention to this. So what we need to do, what do we need to do? All right, let me just do this. Const connect. So I will extract this DB connection. I will extract this DB connection to this. So I'm returning the database connection. So I will return the database connection. Now, this is database connection. It's not a function. So we execute it like this. So if you are to insert a data, so this is what you are going to do. Const the same format, result, comma, field, because you want to execute a function. DB connection dot query. What do we need to do? We need to write our insert query. Do we still remember how to write insert query? Insert into, what's the name of the table? Employees. Define the columns we want to input into the database. We want to input into name, comma, position, comma, age, comma, salary, in that order. Then the values of what we want to insert. Now we now need to pass this in this format. So I'm going to show us two formats on how we can send data to this place. So now what we need to do is define it this way. Request dot, okay, request dot data dot name, followed by request dot data dot position, followed by age, followed by salary. All right, so we need to rest.json. Let's return a message. Data saved successfully. So now we're expecting this execution to insert data into the database. So we need to stop this query and restart it again, this server, and restart it again. So the test API is expected to save data into the database. So if we hit these requests, all right, the object is not a treatable. Where is that? Okay, yeah. All right. So let me check something. Because we now extract the database connection into a separate operation. So that is what's going on. So this is what I'm going to do. Const connect equals to our weight of DB connection. So now, instead of using this, we can now use connect. Let me check if that will work. Yes, it's working. The same thing goes here. So you define the connection in a separate line of code. and use that connection over here. That's all. So if you restart the server, start it again, we're expecting it to work now. Okay, let me do it this way. Connect, cannot read the properties. All right, I'm coming. Let's check if, yeah, it's the same way. Hold on, let me check why it's throwing over here. Because it had a body. So let me extract this into a query. Const query equals to this. Now let me try and console.log the query that's expected to execute. So we try and run it. This is working. All right, insert into employees. So it's getting the data now. Name, position, HR. All right, let's try and put this as, pass it as a string as it should. Um, Now, if I try to start it one more time, run it again, so it's now passing it as a string. Now, I now need to try and save it. So connect dot query to accept this query, SQL query. Run it again. Why is this thing throwing? We are doing it the right way. Um, Hold on. Let me try and inspect this. Um, the connection, the database connection is connected. All right, so can we all see what? Can we all see the screen? Can we all see this? Um. Oh, this is where the issue is coming from. I'm not awaiting the execution. I believe that should fix the error now. Yeah, it fixed it. That's where the error is coming from. Can we all see where the error is coming from? So this query, this is what happened before, is a promise. I need to I wait for the execution to be successful before I return. That's why it's throwing an error. So now this we've been able to save this data into the database. So now if I refresh the database, all we can see now is the data we've sent. Can we all see? Oh, it's even saving before. Mike Adelowo is now into the database. Are we here? Hello, can you guys hear me and see my screen? So we've been able to save the data into the database. If I pass my name, Murtado Sodiq, developer, age 30, salary 500. So if I send this data to the database, can we all see data saved successfully? So if I refresh the database now, I'm going to see it there. Can we all see? Can we see the data in the database? Now, if I try to run the API to fetch all the employee, where is the API? This API to fetch all the employee, we are going to see the data now. Can we all see? Can we see? Can we see all the data? Adewale, Sarah, Mike Adilowo. Can we see? Can we see? Can you guys see my screen? So this is the simple code block that make up all this code execution. Simple code block. The code is not much. Let me even refactor this. Let me destruct this name, comma, position, comma, age, comma, salary. So I'm destructing it over here. Then instead of doing this, I can now do this. So the code can be readable. So can we all see that? So that is all. So this line of code save the data into the database. This line of code save the data into the database while this line of code is retrieving the data from the database. Can we all see this? This line of code is retrieving the data from the database. And we can as well implement an API to delete the data by the ID. So we can as well do the same thing, the employee ID slash employee ID slash ID. So if you do the same thing, app.delete slash employee, and we all see this slash ID, comma, async. Can we all see what I'm doing? So this API is expected to delete the data from the database. So now we need to connect to the database, then write the query to do that. So all we need to do is just write the query to delete from employee. Do we still remember the query? Where the ID equals the ID we are extracting from the request. So we cannot do this const ID, extract the ID request dot params of ID, extract the ID from the request, then pass it over here. Can we see that? So this query, this API, this line of code is expected to delete the data based on the ID we pass to the database. Now, if I restart the server, can we see that we have a duplicate of ID of 3 and 4? My is the same thing. We can just try and delete ID of 4, which is Adelowo, which we insert the second time. So we can do this, do the API like this, delete API slash 4. Hello, can you guys hear me? So now if I hit this API to delete the data, it's going to delete the data from the database. So now data deleted successfully. If you refresh our database, we cannot longer see this data anymore. Can we see? It's no longer in database. And if we call the API to get all employees, it will not be there again. Can we all see that? Data with the ID of 4 is no longer among the API, among the data retrieving from the database. Now, this is how a simple Express API looks. We've been able to establish a connection between the database and the application. We've been able to insert data, read data from database, save data from database, and so this will be the end of our class for today. We are going to continue from here in our next class. So I'm waiting. If you guys have any question, let me show us the code one more time. This is line of code. All right. So do we have any question? So this is the code. This is the code one more time. Do we have any question? I'm waiting on us to, if you have any question, no. Can you guys hear me? Hello? So one thing I will do is that I will push this code to GitHub. So anybody that wants to check it out can pull the code and check it from there. Do you all understand? All right. In the absence of no question, thank you very much, and I will see you guys in the next class.